I woke up to a hooded figure standing over me. Due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exit to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house-looking buildings arranged in sort of a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path lead back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. Stay with me. After a day of exploring, and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name. A harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds. My parents' bed, closer to the door, and mine, further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. What? I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who is she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking, ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly we were out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I ran down the other path, towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder. But it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets close to me and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." The explanation, some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room the one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, thought he was me, assumed leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of US. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who is now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. Creep has been stalking my home for almost a year, tried breaking in 2 weeks ago. So, I'm a 23-year-old female. I live in a townhouse with my 2 children, 2 and 6 months old. My fiancé did live with us until 2 weeks ago when I caught him trying to cheat and made him move out. That's important to the story. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and when he did live with us, my ex worked evenings. Sorry for the long post. Let me set the scene. We live in a tiny town in northern Pennsylvania. My line of townhouses sits in front of a big field that runs to a line of woods. As far as I'm aware, these woods stretch for at least a few miles, and I'm not aware of any houses in there or any roads that lead through them. My living room has 3 windows that look to the field, and my bedroom on the 2nd floor only has 1 window that faces that way as well. People do tend to walk their dogs back in the field, and kids sometimes play back there, but I rarely ever see anyone close to my house. For that reason, I tend to leave my blinds and curtains open because I guess I just enjoy the view. So, in July 2019, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. All the lights were off, but I had my window and blinds open since it was so warm. I was looking out the window and I noticed small red and white lights just outside. I got up and looked to realize that the lights were coming from a drone. I ran downstairs to where my fiancé of the time was sitting in the living room and ran to the window. I told him what I saw, but of course, when he went to look, it was gone. I was paranoid that the drone could have had a camera on it and someone was watching me with it. I kept my blinds closed for a while after that. Fast forward to January of this year. I guess I, stupidly, got comfortable and assumed that whoever was flying the drone was a one-time creep. My blinds were open and I had just gotten out of the shower. I was sitting on my bed pretty much naked except for my underwear, scrolling on my phone when out of the corner of my eye I saw lights again out of the dark window. It was that damn drone again. I ran out of the room and waited for a few minutes. I peeked back into my room and it was gone. I quickly shut my blinds and got dressed. Honestly, I felt sick at how stupid I was to leave my window open again, especially when I was practically naked. Now for the really disturbing part. My 2-year-old son and I were out in the field 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I kicked out my boyfriend, playing ball. I had my 6-month-old strapped to me in a baby carrier. Probably about a half hour after we had been out there, I heard a slight whirring noise coming towards us. I looked up and saw the damn drone flying towards us. I looked around and didn't see anyone. It stopped right over us. I freaked and grabbed my son and dragged him into the house, looking back at the tree line every so often as we went. I knew they had to be hiding in there. I went inside, closed the blinds, and called my mom and told her about the situation. She told me to just keep an eye out. I said I would. My son likes to line his toys up along the windowsill, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to open them up just an inch or so. A little while later, after we ate dinner and it was almost dark, I was feeding my 6-month-old and my son was playing. He was standing over by the window, lining up his toys. He started saying, "Dada, Dada." I assumed he was just missing his father and dismissed him by saying he was going to see him that weekend. He kept saying, "Dada, Dada," though. I looked up and saw him pointing to the window, under the little gap the blinds didn't cover. I froze. I remembered that he calls any man with facial hair Dada because it reminds him of his father. But there was no way someone would be bold enough to come up to my window. Not when my neighbors are right there. Anyone could see them. But there aren't any lights back there, so unless someone stepped out of their house, I guess nobody would see them. Maybe it was my ex. But he should be at work at that time. I ran to the window and moved my son. I didn't want to lift the blinds, but honestly, I was sure it had to be the person who had been creeping on me for the past year, and I wanted to see who it was. I pushed the blinds up and was looking at a man who I definitely had never seen before, crouching in front of me. He was bald with a mustache and goatee. I have no idea how old he was. He could have been anywhere from 30 to 50. When he saw me, he smiled and stood up. I yelled and told him to fuck off and that I was calling the cops. He just stood there, smiling at me like some freak. I was about to close the blinds again when he said something I couldn't hear. I told him to leave again and he said, "Louder this time, I just want to talk to you." I shook my head no and yelled the same thing to him. He started slapping his hands on the window, yelling "No, no, no," over and over. I grabbed my phone, scared he was going to try to break in. I dialed 911. My kids were crying from the yelling and I felt on the verge of tears. I told the operator what was going on. The whole time I was on the phone, the man was pounding on my window, screaming now. He was yelling all kinds of nonsense, and I only caught some of it. He said he's been watching me for months. I'm beautiful. He wants me to come with him. He'll kill my children if I don't. The operator told me to go into an upstairs room and hide until the police arrive. My town doesn't have a police department, so we rely on the state police. She said it would be about 20 minutes, but to stay on the phone with her. The man was practically punching my window now and was just screaming like a maniac. I was about to grab my kids and run upstairs when I heard someone else screaming. The man bolted. I looked out and saw my neighbor and his girlfriend. I opened the window and my neighbor said that he heard the man, so he ran around the building. He said when the guy heard him, he ran back to the woods and disappeared in the tree line. They said they also called the police. I thanked them 100 times. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They did a quick search around the buildings and in the trees, but obviously didn't find anything. I've been super paranoid since then and stayed at my parents' a few nights after it happened. I don't know why that guy targeted me or why he waited so long to do something. I'm just happy my neighbors were there to intervene, or who knows what would have happened. So, to the creep who has been stalking me and my family for the last year, I genuinely hope we never ever meet again. The guy I met for coffee called me for hours straight afterward. 200 plus texts later, I filed a police report. I met a guy this weekend. We were at the same restaurant. He was with a wedding party, and I was with family, not connected to the wedding couple in any way, just happened to be at the same restaurant where the wedding reception was being hosted. He was polite and respectful and offered me his number. I took it and decided to text him. We texted for a day or so and then made arrangements to get together for coffee. We got together in the middle of the day at a public place. I drove myself. I texted a friend and told her where I'd be and the guy's name. I figured I was being overly cautious. The first 3/4 of the conversation was normal enough. We talked about work, schooling, basketball, etc. It turned out he was a lot younger than I thought he was. He's 22, I'm 35. He went from being kind of shy and very respectful to telling me a story about how the night after the wedding he came home and people were being crazy. I asked what he meant, and he then elaborated to tell me he had walked into his bedroom and lesbian girls I know were having sex on my bed. But he was a gentleman and didn't stick around to watch, and then locked eyes and asked, "Have you ever been in that kind of situation before?" I said, "Well, I've lived in apartments, so I've heard people sometimes," and he pushed further and asked, "No, but have you ever walked in on something like that?" I said, "No." That's a weird story to tell someone you just met, and changed the subject. He talked about himself a lot. He did ask me questions, but would interrupt me when I tried to answer and continue to talk about himself. Something felt odd. He was not acting like he was the night I met him. He leaned in over the table a lot and made a noticeable effort to lock eyes with me. I like eye contact, but it felt more like a stare down after a while. I could feel myself moving away the further he leaned in. He started to talk about how he used to pick up girls, but he doesn't do that anymore because he realized that the girls he picked up at the bars were probably whores who went there every weekend. Then he wanted to know if I drank, smoked, did drugs, I ever party, where I like to go out, do I see other men, etc. Almost no pauses. One question after the other. We talked for a few minutes more and he looked at his phone and said the game I wanted to watch is going to start soon. Do you want to get out of here? Turns out there was a basketball game on and he wanted me to come back to his place to watch it. I said no thanks, we just met so I'm not comfortable with that, but maybe we can talk again soon. His face sort of changed and he said, "I'm sorry, but I thought you were going to come back with me." I told him I wasn't sure how he got that impression. I had not at any point said I would do that. He kept asking me to come back to his place, and I kept saying no. He kept asking me why not. I kept saying, "I just met you, and I'm not comfortable going back to your house." He said, "Fine, let's go to the park then." Red flags and alarm bells were going off, so I said, "No, thanks, I'm not interested." He begged and said he'd even skip the game if I wanted him to. I said no, just go home, we just met for coffee, it's not a big deal if we can't take it further today. He then asked me to take a walk in the field behind the coffee shop, looked at the ground, and said, I'll do anything you want, just don't leave. I said again I wasn't going to go anywhere else with him that day, please just respect that and we'll talk later. I got into my car, and as he was pulling away, he yelled out his car window at me, I'm going to do everything I can to change your mind. Come over. I sat and watched him leave because things just felt weird. I drove home and my phone was blowing up the whole time. He was texting and calling, saying he was home and I should come over. Then he sent me a video of himself watching basketball on his couch alone. He started sending me messages saying he could see a future with me, that I was the most beautiful woman he's ever met, that it was horrible for such a beautiful woman to be single, and that he liked our chances to be together. The entire coffee date was 40 minutes. Max. He continues to ask me to come over. I said I was happy to meet him for coffee, but I had told him I wasn't going to come before I left and was not going to go back on what I said. Then the call started. He called and called over and over for the next several hours. I texted him after the first couple of calls, and he sent me another text saying how beautiful and perfect I was and he wanted to date and travel together, and all I could think to say was, I'm sorry, I don't feel the same way about you that you seem to feel about me. I wish you well. Take care. He said he didn't understand. Did that mean I didn't want to see him again? So, I replied with, I'm sorry for not being clearer. No, I don't want to see you again. I'm sorry. I wish you well.